It will nearly be 100 days since Israel launched its offensive in Gaza, and there have been a flurry of briefings that the operation would be transitioning to a new phase in the war, with fewer troops, less bombing, and the use of more targeted airstrikes. To make it appear as if this troop drawdown is their decision, not Washington's, the Israeli military claimed to have wrested the north of the Strip from Hamas's control. And yet, as these briefings were taking place, the Israeli military announced that at least 103 soldiers had been wounded in the fighting in the previous 24 hours. The day after, the deaths of 9 soldiers were announced. In the same period, the Palestinian Health Ministry announced 126 deaths from airstrikes. In the latest 24-hour period, it's 147 civilians killed. The casualties sustained by the Israeli army and civilians in Gaza on a daily basis are at odds with the claims of a new, lower intensity war. The more obvious explanation for the casualties is that 100 days on, the war is being fought as ferociously as it was on day one. Hamas is not waving a white flag. So what has Israel achieved as a result of throwing the full might of its air force and army at Gaza, regardless of the cost in civilian life, and with the full intent to make the land uninhabitable? The War Cabinet had 3 objectives in this campaign: to knock Hamas out, to change the demographic balance of Jews and Arabs by forcing as many Palestinians to leave, and to alter the landscape in a way that no other militant group could ever again do what Hamas did on October the 7th. How has it fared on each count? Has Israel achieved its military objectives? Plainly, no. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant warned of an even longer period of fighting to come. Not a single hostage has been released alive by the Israeli military operation. And what about that famed tunnel network which they would dismantle? The Israeli army has one of the most advanced capabilities in the detection, mapping and destruction of tunnels of any army in the world. And they've been taken aback by what they have uncovered. Hardened and deeper tunnels stretching for hundreds of kilometers. 100 days on from the most ferocious aerial bombardment the world has witnessed since the bombing of Dresden and Hamburg in the Second World War, Hamas has retained its ability to fight and inflict losses on Israeli tanks and soldiers on a daily basis. But has Israel forced an exodus from Gaza? It certainly created a humanitarian catastrophe. A UN report compiled in December found that 80% of everyone in the world who's considered to be in a catastrophic state of hunger is in Gaza right now. But no, Gazans are determined to stay, fully aware of their responsibility as the descendants of the Palestinians who were forced into exile in 1948 and 1967. Is Israel redrawing the map of the Middle East? Just before the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken flew in to stop a regional war breaking out, Israel carried out 2 targeted assassinations, both aimed at Hezbollah. The first was of Hamas's second-in-command, Salah al-Aruri, and the second was of Wissam al-Tawil, the deputy head of the elite Radwan force. Aruri was hit in Dahir at the height of the rush hour in Hezbollah's heartland, and the message was obvious: we can hit you whenever and wherever we want. Hezbollah's reply was not slow in coming. It hit the air base on Mount Meron with 62 rockets and the northern command with a UAV attack. Hezbollah was sending its own reply about the accuracy and sophistication of its military reach. Could Israel be any more successful in finishing Hezbollah off after the failure to finish Hamas off? The US, for one, doubts it. But the war in Gaza is kicking a hornet's nest of highly armed, largely autonomous, battle-hardened militia groups, all nestling in weak states and within striking distance of Israel's vulnerable northern and eastern borders. The Houthis, after more than 24 attacks on Western shipping going through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, have forced nearly 400 container ships to divert from the Suez Canal. This accounts for over 1/5 of global container traffic. And after an Iraqi militia leader was killed by US airstrikes in Iraq, the Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani announced that his government would close all US military bases in Iraq, a major objective of Iran since the killing of Soleimani 4 years ago. The Jordanian army is now locked in a struggle with drugs and weapons smugglers linked to Iranian-backed militias, another sign of the porous nature of its borders with Syria and Iraq. This leaves the US and Britain, the two powers with the biggest responsibility for the carnage in Gaza, with few, if any, cards to play, and time is running out. Neither are hapless spectators, having backed Israel's war of revenge, the former by supplying bombs and shells Israel used to level Gaza to rubble, and both by stopping all international attempts to impose an immediate ceasefire. Can any of this rank as an achievement to anyone thinking rationally? If anything, these 100 days feels like the opening shots of a much larger and longer war. As far as the US and Israel, the two principal antagonists of this war, are concerned, it's no longer a question of the blind leading the blind. It's the strategically weak being led by the tactically angry, and that path leads to mutual oblivion. Israel's war on Gaza could yet spell the end of this US president.